Hello everyone, welcome to pricing. This is one of the most exciting topics in marketing. And today I'm going to go through some examples in pricing so that you get a general idea of how we set prices. America is built on wheels, and a gas station is something we're all familiar with. Usually, traffic congregates at road intersections. As a result, these are appealing locations to have gas stations. So let's start with a common intersection with a couple of gas stations. Here, the two gas stations are at the two corners of the intersection. Very often, when gas stations are set up like this, would see matching prices. That is, the two gas stations very often offer the same gas price. And let's say you are the owner of the gas station on top. And now your competitor has lowered the gas price from 175 to 174. What would you do? Think about your answer and why. If you also drop the price from 175 to 174, then both of you would be charging 174 instead of 175, and both of you are worse off. How do you compete with the other gas station then if you don't want to drop the price? Pause the video and think about your answers. I bet you have written down to open retail shops, selling hot coffee, and offer loyalty programs. These are all good ways to compete with your competitors by enriching your service offerings. Now, my question for you is there a pricing way focused on gasoline that you can do to improve profitability when in this competitive scenario? Let me give you more information. Out of these two roads, one of them is busier. This road is the road where the community drive back and forth to work and back home. Let's say going up is to work, going down is coming home. Can you think of a way to price your gasoline in order to improve profitability if you were the gas station on top? Pause the video and think about your answers. If you have written down increasing your price, congratulations. That's $1 million idea if you were one of the major oil and gas operators. Gasoline is a tough business. It is a commodity, and the gas offered at gas stations generally do not differentiate from each other very much. So the products are pretty much uniform across different gas stations. In this case, the core concept to think about in order to charge price differently is what we call segmentation in marketing. That is, how are your customers different from each other? Segmentation can be a multi-dimension concept. How do the drivers on this road differ from each other? One dimension you may or may not have considered is people driving this direction. The gas station on top is more convenient for them. When people driving this direction, the gas station at the bottom is more convenient for them. Although people can pull over from one side of the road to the gas station on the other side, it is an inconvenience and it increases the chance of an accident. So, if you were the driver along this road, and if this gas station is only 1 cent more expensive than the other, would you pull over? Or maybe not. So as long as there are plenty of people who are willing to take the higher price for convenience, the gas station on top is able to take advantage of this and significantly increase profitability. Because 1 cent per gallon at a gas station would increase the profitability of the gas station by hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. So we can use segmentation to differentiate customers and charge different prices in this case. It helps us increase profitability. Let me change the scenario a little bit. I'll move the gas station at the bottom from one side of the road to the other side. Let's say they still have matching prices, and they are somewhat equally convenient for drivers driving in this direction. So my question for you is, let's say the gas stations are advertising their prices at the eye level. How do drivers make choices of gas stations? Versus a different scenario, when both gas stations are advertising their prices with a very high billboard. How do these two different scenarios differ in terms of competition, in terms of how customers are making choices of gas stations? Pause the video and think about your answer. Imagine yourself being a driver driving along the road. When the gas stations are advertising prices at eye level, you see only one gas price at a time. So when you see the first gas station, you have to make a decision whether to pull in and pump gas here. Or you can decide to skip this gas station and drive forward until you see the price of the second gas station. So this is what we call sequential decision making. It is actually very similar to many life decisions. For example, you are dating someone, you decide whether to marry the person. If you marry, you stop. If you don't, you're going to move forward and check out the next one. So that's sequential decision making. And the other scenario, when the gas stations are advertising their prices high, drivers would observe the prices of both gas stations at the same time, and then they would simply choose whichever gas station is cheaper. Under which scenario do you think the two gas stations are involving in more fierce competition? This is a question we will answer in a later date, when we specifically discuss the issue of competitive pricing, but keep that in mind. Still on gas station. Let's say you are taking a road trip from Oklahoma, driving all the way into Texas. When you cross the border, you may notice gasoline price changes. That's because Oklahoma has a higher tax rate on gasoline, so gas in Oklahoma are more expensive than gas in Texas. If you operate a gas station right across the border on the Texas side, what would you do? I'm sure many of you have come up with the answer. That is, you can actually charge a higher price than Texas gasoline, as long as you are lower than gasoline in Oklahoma. That is what happened to many gas stations right across the border. How are these gas stations segmenting drivers? Here, the dimension for segmentation is how full the tank is. For a driver whose tank is close to empty, the driver may not be able to afford to wait. The driver sees a lower price. The driver decides to pull in. On the other hand, for a driver whose gas tank is only half empty, the driver may decide to wait and see more gas stations before pumping gas. Here's a final example on gas stations. Let's zoom in on Google Maps. There are two gas stations in Pearland. 1, 2, along the Shadow Creek Parkway. This situation is very similar to the illustration that we had earlier, where you have Highway 288 and people driving along McCarter Road going back home in Shadow Creek Ranch. So these two gas stations are on the same side of the road. Without considering the difference between a Buc-ee's gas station and a Kroger's gas station, is there any other dimension that you can segregate the customers and pricing these two gas stations differently? Pause the video and think about your answer. An interesting perspective between these two gas stations is one of them is larger. When people are going back from work, the smaller gas station fills up very quickly. it has limited capacity of 8 pumps. And then there's Buc-ee's gas station, which is much larger. So in this case, Buc-ee's can implement a dynamic pricing to raise its prices during the rush hours where Kroger has capacity problem to fulfill demand. A quick recap on gas stations. The first important concept that we have introduced is segmentation, segmentation, and segmentation. Segmentation itself is a multi-dimensional concept. Here in the 3 examples, we have used the driving direction of drivers, how empty their tanks are, and whether they are willing to wait to pump gas as dimensions to segment them. And then we charge the segment with a higher willingness to pay at a higher price point. A second concept that has arisen in this example is competition is generally bad for business. It is good for consumers, but it is the enemy for businesses. The different ways to deal with competition is to avoid competition, build your gas station in a place where you don't have a competitor, to soften competition instead of competing to lower price, maybe matching or increase your prices. And third is to preemptively prevent competition from happening. That's a more advanced topic we're going to discuss in a later lecture. To set the right price, where do we start then? Let's look at a simple formula where for any business we have revenue minus costs equals profit. Here revenue is price times demand, and costs is generally something the businesses would have known. How do we price in order to maximize the profit? We don't know the demand. We want to decide price, and the only component left here is costs. We actually have a pretty good idea about the costs. That's why a very commonly used pricing tactics is to use costs as the basis to set price. Let me introduce cost plus pricing. Here we have 3 participants, a manufacturer, a wholesaler, and a retailer. The manufacturer makes the product, the wholesaler distributes the product, and the retailer sells the product to consumers. The manufacturer, having a cost of $45, marks it up by $5 and charge $50. So $50 is the manufacturer's price. And the manufacturer's price becomes the wholesaler's costs and marks up $10, and the wholesale price is $60. And $60 is the cost that the retailer receives, and the retailer further marks up the price by $40, and finally $100 is the retail price that the consumers receive. As you can see, cost plus pricing has many advantages. It's simple, it's transparent, easy to understand, and it seems fair. But cost plus pricing has issues. Let me show you an interesting example. 3 cities, Chicago, New York, and Philadelphia. We have their population density, the automobile theft rates, the income, and the insurance cost of a comparable insurance. So my question for you is, if you look at these numbers, Philadelphia at $1,679 seems to have significantly higher insurance cost than either one of the 2 other big cities, Chicago or New York. So my question for you is, why is automobile insurance in Philadelphia so expensive? Pause the video and think about your answers. All right, welcome back. I'm sure you have considered some of the important factors here. For example, population density. New York has much higher population density than Chicago or Philadelphia. And higher population density implies that the city is more crowded, and as a result, accidents may be more likely to happen, and car insurance should be more expensive. But New York does not have the most expensive car insurance. You may have considered thefts, so higher thefts should be associated with higher insurance cost. Here, Chicago and New York both have higher thefts, but they do not have more expensive insurance. You may have considered income. Higher income means people are more able to afford insurance, so their willingness to pay for insurance should be higher, and their insurance cost presumably would be higher as well. However, Chicago and New York both have higher income than Philadelphia, but they again do not have higher insurance cost. So my question for you again is, why is automobile insurance in Philadelphia so expensive? This interesting research was published in American Economic Review, the best journal in the field. And the authors have considered all the factors that usually explain insurance cost, but they cannot find any of these factors explaining the runaway insurance cost in Philadelphia. They investigated further, and finally they came up with the answer. Because insurance companies generally run a cost plus pricing. That is, insurance premium, the amount of money you pay insurance company to insure your product, is usually based on previous year's losses that the insurance company incurs. So the insurance company has a payout the previous year, they mark it up, and that marked up amount decides how much premium they charge the next year. So here comes the problem. In one of the years, Philadelphia had a surge in insurance payout. In that year, out of random unluck, insurance companies in Philadelphia had to pay out much more. As a result, they increased their insurance cost. And when insurance becomes more expensive, what do you think will happen? The demand drops. So because insurance are more expensive, some people stopped purchasing insurance. So when there are more people not buying insurance, what happens to the people who buy insurance? Well, when accidents happen, their insurance companies have to pay for the damage, no matter whose fault it is for the accident. So as a result of fewer people buying insurance companies incurred an even higher cost. And then, because they charge their prices based on their cost structure, they further increased the insurance price. And you could guess what happened next is when insurance becomes more expensive, even more people drop out of insurance. And this vicious cycle is what we call a downward spiral of cost plus pricing. You may wonder, what's the solution for the automobile insurance in Philadelphia then? Usually this kind of death spiral is very difficult to get out of without outside influence. Chances are interference from the market regulators may be the best way to reboot the insurance business in Philadelphia and lower the insurance cost and stop this death spiral. Let me give you a numerical example to explain the downward spiral of cost plus pricing. So unit cost is composed of two components. Part of it is from fixed cost, which does not change with the unit of production. This will be costs like equipment. Another part of the cost is the variable cost, which would change with the level of productions. These are the costs like material cost for productions. So unit cost is equal to fixed cost divided by the number of units plus the variable cost. And then in cost plus pricing, price is equal to the unit cost plus a profit margin. So let's say we have a fixed cost of $100 and the variable cost of $5 per unit. And the demand in the market is 50. So the unit cost here is $5 variable cost plus $100 fixed cost divided by 50. That's equal to $7. Let's say the company uses a fixed markup of $2. So $7 unit costs, the price is $9. Now the bad news comes, bad weather, and the company incurs a negative shock. The demand drops to 40. Now, what's the unit cost then? Well, in this case, the unit cost increases to $7.50. And if the company still marks up the price by $2, the price increases from $9 to $9.50. And because of the price increase, the demand drops further from 40 to 30. Now, the demand is 30, the unit cost becomes $8.33. Again, a $2 markup, the price becomes $10.33. So, because of a higher price, the demand drops further to 20. As you can see, if this death spiral keeps going, demand would eventually go to zero. Let me recap. So we have discussed the 3 C's of pricing. First is cost. And the pure cost-based pricing, called cost-plus pricing, just add a standard markup to the cost of the product. It is a flawed pricing scheme. And the second C is competition. Competition-driven pricing is setting prices based on the competitors' charge for similar products. This permeates our gas station examples. But if you only pay attention to price competition, competitors are going to drive the price down all the way to cost. So, a pure competition-driven pricing is also a flawed pricing tactics. The third C is customer. And we have talked about customer value pricing using segmentation to decide how the value created for gas stations are different for different customers. When we make pricing decisions, all the 3 C's enter the picture. And as you will see, value pricing tends to be the most efficient way ultimately to make pricing decisions. And at the same time, you consider both costs and competition. Here's the picture I want you to remember. This happy puppy has the whole canvas to decide what the optimal price is. But the situation is not that simple. Pricing decision can be complicated. On the lower end, you have to charge a price that is able to cover your variable cost. So you cannot charge below your variable cost. On top, customers' willingness to pay forms your price ceilings. If you charge more than that, customers are not going to buy your product. And your competitors will fight you fiercely to compete for the market space. On top of that, there are also regulations preventing unfair competitions. So at the end of the day, you are a leashed puppy with a limited space to decide what your optimal price is. I want you to remember this picture. Pricing is a complicated decision. Finally, let me give you a brief overview of what we cover in this course. First, we are going to cover the general topics of the 3 C's on pricing: costs, competition, and customers. We'll talk more specifically about all 3 components. Then we move on to the topic of how to price. And under different scenarios, our pricing tactics would also change. When you have one product, many buyers, we consider auction and nonlinear pricing and the dynamic pricing. When you have many products and many buyers, we consider bundling and versioning of the products. I know these concepts may appear foreign to you at this point, but these things will become clear when we get to the specifics. And finally, we'll cover in the channel, when you have manufacturers, wholesalers, and retailers, how they coordinate to create an optimal pricing contract. That's our introductory discussion on pricing. Thank you. I'll see you next time.